And I very, very seldom talk to anybody on an airplane, because to me a flight of 2.5 or 3 hours is an opportunity to meditate and to get quiet, especially if there's loud people around me and a lot of noise and a lot of distractions and so on. To me, that's the ultimate opportunity. It's like having a leaf blower on board, you know. Because I'm still trying to work on those little guys that carry those things around. Thank you, God, for sending me this annoying little And so, but for some reason, I started talking to this gentleman, and as things began to progress, he, it turns out, is going through a real nasty divorce. And his wife of the last 12 or 13 years or so, his second marriage, is a man my age, 61 years old, who was really struggling in his relationships and with this, and his ex-wife is giving him all kinds of problems about wanting half of everything that he's ever created, and wanting, you know, he's going through all of the reasons why she was wrong, and how wrong she was, and how she had no right to do that, and how they had made an agreement before they got married, and they'd signed it, and now she wants to throw that out, and it's all greed. And meantime, he's overweight, and he's suffering from various kinds of stress-related things in his life. Candidate for an ulcer for sure, blood pressure going up, lots of headaches, illness. All of these things will come about from this kind of way of processing your life. So I asked him the question. I said, if I had 2 wands, and the first wand was one I said, look, you can have everything you want in your life, including being right. And you can keep all of that you've ever amassed in your life, and you can make her wrong, and you can shut her out by paying a lot of money to attorneys, and you can win. And you can have all of the stuff that you've accumulated. You get that with this wand. I said, yeah. He said, I like that. I said, but you can't have that wand if you take this wand, and this wand is one which I say to you that no matter what comes your way for the rest of your life, no matter what you encounter, you will have peace. You will be at peace. So no matter what she says or anybody does to you or whatever comes along, you're going to be at peace. Which would you take? And he said, well, obviously, I would take the one to be at peace. I said, well, from this moment on, you have that choice. You can make the decision to be at peace. And you can still hire whoever it is that you need to hire in order to take care of all of these transactions, but you can instruct them that I don't want any news other than that which will bring me to peace. If you have something to say to me that will not make me peaceful, you just deal with it. That's what I'm paying you for. That's your job. Your job is to keep me at peace. Don't tell me anything about she has no right to do. I don't want to hear any of that. Whatever you tell me, it has to bring me peace. Otherwise, just handle it yourself. I said, you can do that. And I said, in the end, even if she takes half of everything that you've ever accumulated in your life, the other half is more that you could spend in the next 25 lifetimes anyway. So your attachment to being right and not being at peace is the thing that is going to destroy you. And you might win, but on the day that you win, you'll probably drop dead. Or wish that you had, because you'll be so sick. Take your choice. I can choose peace, says the Course in Miracles, rather than this. Tattoo it to your forehead. It's what spirit is about. And that's where you want to place your attention and your energy. Not on what is wrong, but on what it is that you feel in your heart you can do to bring us all closer to God. And the grieving process that some of you referred to in your questions is not necessarily the self-actualized way that you handle tragedies in our lives. I remember a book by Ernest Hemingway called The Islands in the Stream. And this man finds out that his son has just been killed in the war overseas in Europe. And that night he's at a party and he's dancing. And someone said to him, how could you possibly be here when you found out what happened to your son this afternoon? And his answer in that novel was, Sooner or later, I know I'm going to have to get over this or it will destroy me. I just picked sooner. And that sounds cruel to some of us who believe that we have to spend a long time suffering. But I remember when Nisargadatta said to a woman who complained to her about her cancer, she said, "I suffer so." And he said, "You do not suffer. Only the person you imagine yourself to be suffers." And when she responded, "You can't tell me that you don't suffer," she wanted to make him wrong. And she started pointing out all the things that were wrong in India, and the war with Pakistan, and all of the pestilence, and all of the poverty, and all of the horrible things, and the starvation, and so on. And he looked at her and said straight away, and I'll never forget this, he said, "Ma'am, in my world, nothing ever goes wrong." That's not something I'm asking you to just embrace enthusiastically. I know that you've been raised in a certain way, as I have, and I ache when I see children hurt, when I see people maimed. And I'm suggesting to you that there is another way to even begin to look at all of this from the perspective of yourself as an infinite soul. And the problem then no longer becomes something that you are living with in agony and pain and suffering and creating all of the diseases of your life, but it becomes a clarion call to bring the world closer to God. And like I said about my father, maybe he signed up to be a jerk, to be a thief, to be a drunk, in order to teach me how to forgive it. I'm not saying it's easy, but as Maslow said, those are the flaws of self-actualizing people.
Living in the flow. The Tao and water are synonymous, according to the teachings of Lao Tzu. You are water. Water is you. Think about the first 9 months of your life after conception. You lived in and were nourished by amniotic fluid, which is truly unconditional love flowing into you, flowing as you. You are now 75% water, and your brain is 85% water, and the rest is simply muscled water. Think about the mysterious, magical nature of this liquid energy that we take for granted. Try to squeeze it, and it eludes us. Relax our hands into it, and we experience it readily. If it stays stationary, it will become stagnant. If it's allowed to flow, it will stay pure. It does not seek the high spots to be above it all, but settles for the lowest places. It gathers into rivers, lakes, and streams, courses to the sea, and then evaporates to fall again as rain. It maps out nothing, and it plays no favorites. It doesn't intend to provide sustenance to the animals and plants. It has no plans to irrigate the fields, to slake our thirst, or to provide the opportunity to swim, sail, ski, and scuba dive. These are some of the benefits that come naturally from water simply doing what it does and being what it is. The Tao asks you to clearly see the parallels between you and this naturally flowing substance that allows life to sustain itself. Live as water lives, since you are water. Become as contented as is the fluid that animates and supports you. Let your thoughts and behaviors move smoothly in accordance with the nature of all things. It's natural for you to be gentle, to allow others to be free to go where they're inclined to go, and to be as they need to be without interference from you. It is natural to trust in the eternal flow, to be true to your inner inclinations and stick to your words. It's natural to treat everyone as an equal. All of these lessons can be derived by observing how water, which sustains all life, behaves. It simply moves, and the benefits it provides occur from it being what it is, in harmony with the present moment and knowing the truth of precisely how to behave. What follows is what Lao Tzu might say to you based upon his writing of the 8th verse of the Tao Te Ching. First, when you're free to flow as water, you're free to communicate naturally. Information is exchanged and knowledge advances in a way that benefits everyone. Be careful not to assign yourself a place of importance above anyone else. Be receptive to everyone, particularly those who may not routinely receive respect, such as the uneducated or the homeless or troubled members of our society. Go to the low places, loathed by all men, and have an open mind when you're there. Look for the Tao in everyone you encounter and make a special effort to have acceptance, gentleness, and kindness course through you to others. By not being irritating, you'll be received with respect. By making every effort to avoid controlling the lives of others, you'll be in peaceful harmony with the natural order of the Tao. This is the way you nourish others without trying. Be like water, which creates opportunities for swimming and fishing and surfing and drinking and wading and sprinkling and floating and an endless list of benefits by not trying to do anything other than simply flow. And secondly, let your thoughts float freely. Forget about fighting life or trying to be something else. Rather, allow yourself to be like the material compound that comprises every aspect of your physical being. In the Hidden Messages of Water, Masaru Emoto explains that we are water, and water wants to be free. The author has thoroughly explored the ways in which this compound reacts, noting that by respecting and loving it, we can literally change its crystallization process. If kept in a container with the words love or thank you or you're beautiful imprinted on it, water becomes beautifully radiant crystals. Yet if the words on the container are you fool, Satan, or I will kill you, the crystals break apart, are distorted, and seem confused. The implications of Emoto's work are stupendous. Since our consciousness is located within us, and we're essentially water, then if we're out of balance in our intentions, it's within the realm of possibility that our intentions can impact the entire planet and beyond in a destructive way. As our Creator, the eternal Tao, might put it, water of life am I, poured forth for thirsty men. Do the Tao now. Drink water silently today, while reminding yourself with each sip to nourish others in the same life-flourishing ways that streams give to the animals and rain delivers to the plants. Note how many places water is there for you, serving you by flowing naturally. Say a prayer of gratitude for this life-sustaining, always-flowing substance.
In the teachings of Buddha, there was a quote that I really loved. I didn't put it as a display quote, but it's really very powerful. And that quote from Buddha is, "The only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something which cannot be destroyed by death." The only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something, not to believe in something, to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. And I wonder if you know something. Know means trust. If you trust in something without any doubt that cannot be destroyed by death, certainly it's not your body or any of your possessions, all of which will become dust. Everything on the planet, including you, to put it in Ken Wilber's terms, is tomorrow's food. It's a constant recycling in the physical plane. So what part of you cannot be destroyed by death? What part of you is real, if you will, as Lao Tzu put it? But I knew there was something in the New Testament that really had struck me. So the first is from John 10, verse 34. It says, "Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods?" From Jesus Christ. "Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods?" Which is really what you have to understand and embrace and know if you're going to become a manifester. You have to know what you are being told here by a great spiritual teacher. You are gods. And the second one was John 14, verse 20, that says, "On that day you will know." See how that word know is always there. You won't believe. You will know. "On that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you." So what is being talked about here? What is being talked about is not something that is physical. It's not like my arm is in your arm, my spleen is in you. What we're talking about here is something that is beyond the physical, that is in you and in the Father, and in me and in everything. And if you get this, if you know this, then you begin to see yourself as connected to this divine intelligence that is everywhere, that is always flowing, that is inexhaustible, that is non-judgmental, that is available for you to plug into, just like electricity. And you can do anything you want with it, like electricity. It'll light up a hospital where everybody is reputed to be ill, and it'll light up a house of ill repute. You can do what you want with it. It is there. It is divine. And you are a piece of it. You are connected to it. And once you trust in this, and once you know this, you almost come to a different perspective in your life. Earlier in the first principle, I had talked about these archetypes that Carl Jung referred to. And in these archetypes, he said that we move from athletes to warriors to statesmen to spirit, and then when we are there, we can be all of these things. And one of the things that he also said is that if you don't get to this highest place, this highest archetype, then you will continue to come back and do it. Now, he's talking about reincarnation. And I'm not going to talk about reincarnation here. The way I see it is I think of God as like the ocean for me. To understand this idea of learning to trust, God is like the ocean, and I am a glass. And I take this glass, and I dip it into the ocean. And I say, okay, what do I have here? And the answer is, I have a glass of God. Now, it's not as big, it's not as strong, it's not as all-knowing, it's not as all-powerful, but it is still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, you are what God is doing. And until you know this, you will never have the trust I'm talking about. You are what God is doing. And if you take a drop of water out of that ocean and you separate it out and you put it over here, you will find that it is weak, that it will collapse, that it has no power, that it can't do anything. Because it is separated from its source. And the same is true of us. When we separate ourselves from our source, from the divinity that is in all things, we take and make ourselves powerless, impotent, unable to do the divine things that we can do when we are united. Both as united with God, or with soul, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, united with each other. You see, it's that separation. It's always that separation. So it's almost like learning to trust in yourself involves trusting in the fact that you have a divinity. And this divinity is evident on the basis of the idea that God is everywhere. And if this intelligence is everywhere, you have to trust that it's in you. And there's no mistakes here. And while you may not always honor everything that you do and that others do, you can see that your essence, your basic essence of what it is that created you in the first place is that divine organizing intelligence that can never die. You've got to know that. You've got to trust in that. So here are 5 attitudes that I believe that we need to cultivate. The first of these is, I am a human being expressing God without reservation. This is an attitude that says, who I am is particular, is individual, but I am expressing God. And therefore, I am honorable, I am worthy, I count, and I shouldn't be thinking of myself as something that is less than valuable. That's the first. The second is, I accept myself without complaint. I have a slogan that I use in my own life. It says, whenever I hear my children complaining or other people and they ask me for advice, I always say, don't complain, don't explain. Don't complain, don't explain. I accept myself without complaint. I look at the body that I'm in, and I understand that this is nothing more than my curriculum to God. There are things about it that if I were to be designing it myself, perhaps I would have done a little differently. I might have put a little extra hair on the top. I might have made myself a little taller. I might have made myself a little darker. I might have made my eyes a different color, whatever it is. But that isn't up to me. Because who I am is not this thing that I occupy. This is just a garage where I park my soul. And it doesn't matter. It is my curriculum to God. And whether it can see or can't see, whether it's in a wheelchair, whether it's 4'1" or 7'3", whether it's dark or white, whether it's living on the plains of the Kalahari, or whether it's living in New Guinea, or in Detroit, or Chicago, it doesn't make any difference. I accept myself without complaint. This is what I showed up in. And not only do I accept myself without complaint, but I accept life without complaining. And all of us have that choice, and we don't listen to that inner voice. That inner voice. I've often said that if prayer is you talking to God, then your intuition is God talking to you. And that intuition is something you want to listen to. And complaining about anything in your world, particularly about yourself, is a way of blocking the free flow of the divine intelligence that is everywhere and wants to be delivering abundance into your life. The third is, and this is a hard one for people, is I take full responsibility for my life. I take full responsibility for my life. You see, if you are disconnected or feel disconnected from the divine source, you cannot manifest. The separation is what keeps you from connecting. You can't align yourself. Not taking responsibility for your life and anything in it. And I get letters from people who feel that I shouldn't be saying this because people who have illnesses that they can't do anything about, they don't want to have to take responsibility for them. Or people who have been victims of abuse and things like this don't want to take responsibility for them. Taking responsibility doesn't mean that you feel guilty about anything that has come your way. It means that I have attracted this into my life in some way that I don't understand. It has showed up in my life. And it's my life. And I want to be able to ensure that these things don't show up anymore. And also I want to be able to send them out of my life. But I can't do it if I don't assume a kind of responsibility for them. No guilt. And the fourth one is, I take on no guilt. If to feel worthy, you don't take on guilt. Just taking on this sense of responsibility. If I get anything in my body, that if it's a hernia, if it's an ache, if it's a pain, if it were a cancer, if it were arthritis, if it's I can't sleep, if it's a cold, if it's a backache, if it's a headache, whatever it is, I am going to say, there's something in me that has attracted this. Rather than, I don't know how this happened, I'm just a victim. These kind of things happen. We live in a carcinogenic world, and these kind of things just happen. It's like the minute that you take responsibility for it, you connect to the divine source, which can heal it. The minute that you say, I had nothing to do with this, then you put that barrier up there, and you're disconnected from the healing of it. So I'm not talking, I want to re-emphasize, I'm not talking about feeling guilty about it. I'm talking about saying, it's here, I've experienced it, I can do something with it. I can either go back to that stage of being an athlete and being a warrior and say, it's all in my ego, or I can do something profound about it, which is to say, I can teach and become a statesman and a spiritual being by teaching others how to avoid having this happen. It came to me for a reason. I don't have to understand it, but I take responsibility for it. No guilt, no abdicating the person who was responsible for it and saying, oh, it wasn't their fault. None of that. No removal of the punishment that the person deserves for that kind of conduct. None of that. Simply taking responsibility and saying, I now connect to whatever it is that's in my life, and I no longer am going to carry around the anguish and the guilt there, any place in my life. As soon as you do that, you honor your worthiness to receive the healing, to receive the abundance, to receive the love that might have been missing from your life. The fifth and final affirmation or attitude to create for ourselves a sense of being worthy is to have congruency in your life. Congruency. I understand the importance of harmony between my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors. Very often, most of the problems that we face as people come from our inability to have congruency or harmony exist between what I think, what I feel, and how I behave. I may think one thing, I may feel something else, and then behave in a different way. And to have a congruency is to honor your worthiness. Virtually all addictions come from an incongruency. I have a thought about one thing, I feel something else, and then I behave in a different way. And that incongruency is what keeps us from feeling worthy.
In reading the aphorisms of Patanjali, he was talking, now you have to remember, we're talking about before the Middle Ages, which were called the Dark Ages. And here was Patanjali writing about the ability to be able to do absolutely miraculous things. The ability to be able to be in more than one place at the same time. The ability to be able to be in the presence of another human being and raise your energy to such a level that you could literally, by your presence alone, just heal that person. The ability to be able to transcend things like diseases. The ability to be able to have the gift of fish and loaves. To just live at such a level of consciousness that anything you placed your attention on instantaneously, you had the capacity and the power to be able to make that realization for you. The book is called How to Know God. Now, it's not called How to Know About God. It's not called How to Believe in God. It's called How to Know God. And How to Know God means making conscious contact with God. It's the only way you can know anything. So here are the 5 aphorisms. The first is called, the central act of ignorance is false identification. The central act of ignorance is called false identification. What does Patanjali mean by false identification? And what does he mean by ignorance? Ignorance is not to be assumed to mean that you are uninformed. It means that you are identifying yourself as a human being with your body and your possessions and this material world. And the central act of that ignorance is the identification falsely with this world of the changing. But beyond the world of the changing is the changeless world. And once you start to identify yourself there and know that this is who you are, know it, like you're listening right now and you're watching, and the energy that is coming into you is coming through your eyes and ears and senses. And it is only your eyes and your ears and your senses that take this energy and twist it into something called evil or problems. It comes into your eyes, these energies, and into your ears, if it could be examined just before it hits your eyes, and just before it reaches your ears, and we could examine it very carefully, you would find that the scientists would say, no, there's no problems in that energy. There's no evil in that energy. Nope, it's just energy. It's just a frequency, it's vibrating at a certain speed. But as soon as it hits your senses, and you begin to interpret it, problems begin to show up in your life. But the energy itself contains no problems. It's just energy. That's proper identification according to Patanjali. That's the first aphorism. The second aphorism sounds like this. The mind of the truly illumined, said Patanjali, is calm, because the peace of God within all things is known, even within the appearance of misery and disease. Even within the appearance of misery and disease. The mind of the truly illumined is always calm. And the mind of the truly illumined understands that the peace of God is in all things. You are in this world, but what? You are not of this world. That is not who you are. You are not of this world, even though you're in it. So you're filling out the forms, you send in your money to the IRS, and you stop at the red lights, and you obey the laws, and you follow the rules, that is, most of them, which seem to make sense, and the ones that don't, you're able to ignore, which you have to, otherwise we'll never have any growth. The third aphorism is quite simple, and it's one that's most troubling to many people in the West. Patanjali said, sin is non-existent. Sin is non-existent. There are only obstacles to one's ultimate union with God. You do not sin when you behave toward another person in a harmful way, when you steal from another person, when you violate any of the commandments or whatever. You have not sinned. You have created an obstacle to your union with God. You see, the reason we don't want to put sin in there, according to Patanjali, is because it creates shame and guilt. Shame computes the absolute lowest in whether you're going to be strong or weak in your life. Shame is the lowest frequency emotion that is possible. It only computes at 25 on a scale of 1 to 1,000. The fourth aphorism that leads us into a spiritual solution to every problem sounds like this. And these last two are the ones that I absolutely resonate to and love the most. The person who is steadfast in his abstention from falsehood has the power to obtain for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. Steadfast in abstaining from means that you never waver and you never have thoughts of falsehood, that is, identifying yourself as a material being rather than a spiritual being. And when you become steadfast in that, when you say to someone, God blesses you, they are blessed by your presence when you have that kind of consciousness. And you present yourself to someone and you are absolutely steadfast in abstention from falsehood. And in the presence of such a person, healing takes place. And blessing takes place. And the fifth aphorism, my favorite of all, says, when a person is steadfast in his abstention from harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his or her presence. So when you become steadfast in your abstention from ever having a thought of harm directing at other people, and that's how you walk through the world, butterflies will land on your shoulder. Birds will not be afraid of you. Little dogs, or even vicious dogs, will become domesticated by being in your presence. All living creatures, babies, will goo-goo and come to you. You know people like this, don't you? And what you'll do is set into motion these dormant forces, which will collaborate with you because you're in spirit rather than in form.